Hello. I'm so glad to be here with you today. My name is John Green, and I am here to talk about the new Miss Peregrine's book, the last book in the series, at least for now, with my friend Ransom Riggs. So, for those of you who don't know, Ransom and I actually went to college together, and we have known each other for most of our lives. And we well, we're good friends in college. We actually took a road trip to the Grand Canyon together, which deeply cemented our friendship. And it has been with just absolute joy that I have watched him grow as a writer and as a person over the last 10 years since the first Miss Peregrine book came out. And I am so pleased, albeit virtually. I wish that we were all together in person, but I'm just so pleased to be able to introduce to all of you the extraordinary, the wonderful, the brilliant, and the New York Times bestselling author, Ransom Riggs. Hi.
Hi, can
Did
you
you
hear
hear
me and
any
see
of the,
me?
yeah, you look great. Did you hear any of the terrible things I said about you?
I heard you say that we went to the Grand Canyon and
Yeah, it's
you
about it.
didn't comment on my driving, which I appreciate.
I
And
thought you
no,
were,
you always make me blush.
thought you're a very good driver. I want
You,
to, so we're
I'm
going to
never sure
go.
how you feel in the moment, but in retrospect, you say really nice things, and I'm like, that's so nice. Anyway,
So
friends.
Ransom and I are going to talk for a while about Miss Peregrine and related matters, but please leave your questions in the Q&A section here on Zoom. I see that there have been 3 questions submitted already, even before we've begun, which is wonderful. So, but please leave your questions as we talk in the Q&A section, and then I will answer a selection. I won't answer any of them. I will ask a selection of them in the second half of our event. But Ransom,
I
I
might
wanted
kick a few over to you. You never
yeah,
know.
that's fine. I'm happy to answer any. I wonder if we could begin. I mean, one of the things I love about this series is the the looping, the circularity, the emphasis on circular imagery and circular plotting techniques. So I wanted to kind of circle back to the very beginning and ask you, way back in 2011 when your first book came out, what what was the initial inspiration for wanting to write this book, a book that merged photographs and text in such an innovative way?
Well, thanks for that. I had been living with some protean version of this story in my head for a long time, and I never really had an outlet for it. It hadn't quite taken form. And in 2009, when I started writing it, I'd been out of film school for a few years and had been thinking for a long time about how to tell stories with pictures, which is essentially what writing a screenplay is, except you don't actually stick any pictures in it. You hope someone else is going to do a good job at doing that. And at the same time, I had also, well, since childhood, been obsessed with photography in various forms, mostly taking them. But when I was when I was a fairly little kid, when I was like 10, I lived in South Florida with my grandmother, and my grandmother was a really interesting lady, and she was a really smart person who'd been like a professor of English and Latin and French, and raised 4 boys and ran a farm, and um, instilled in me a deep love of reading and also garage sales in Florida, which she would drag me to every Saturday, and we would look through. Florida, as you know, is a landscape of wonder and junk, and other people's crap, dragged out of basements and attics and sold. And bargains are everywhere, and old people love bargains. So we went bargain hunting. And while my grandmother was looking for like deals on lightly used socks and old mystery novels, I would try to entertain myself as best as a 10-year-old boy could do in such an environment. And the one thing I found that kept catching my interest, other than like super broken old Transformers, was old pictures. And it was endlessly, baffling to me at first anyway, that somebody would throw away a lot of old heirlooms and family pictures. Um, but of course, at some point, some families just don't stick together, or the pictures are given to the wrong person, or an old person passes away alone, and there's any number of reasons. But I would find these shoe boxes full of old pictures, and they cost like a nickel, and I started to buy them here and there a little bit. And I found one. I have some show and tell. I found this when I was 11, and this little girl reminded me of a girl that I had a innocent summer camp crush on. And I took it home with my baseball cards, and I put it in a little album. It came in a frame, and one day I took it out of its frame after it had been, in a visible place in my room for a couple of months, and I looked at the back of it, and it says, "Dorothy, Chicago, age 15, died of leukemia." And I found that I had never known anyone very close to me who had passed away, and it hit me pretty hard. And this, little smiling face in my room felt like a ghost who I was living with and had been sort of entrusted with the care of. And from that point on, the power of these little slips of paper with lost faces on them became really apparent to me. And then I didn't collect any photos for like 20 years. But in college, I was not in graduate school. In college, I was in college with you in Ohio, but in graduate school, I went to USC in Southern California. And that is also a land of swap meets and junk sales, just more expensive because it's Southern California. And I was trying to, one day I was in grad school and I needed cheap furniture for my apartment. And I went to this giant swap meet, and I found, instead of furniture, people who were selling old photos, and they were really well curated and beautiful. And I got hooked, and I started to find wonderful, evocative old pictures like this. And like this is almost the same picture with different people. And they all seemed like cinema stills, like a little, slice from a lost world, or they just, evoked questions. Who are these people? What the hell are they doing? And there's, I would always look on the back after the Dorothy picture to see if there was any information, and 9 times out of 10 there was nothing. So it was almost an invitation for me to make up a story with these orphaned people who no one else was going to know their story. I read somewhere there was this beautiful article, and I wish I could remember who had written it, but recently someone was talking about the phenomenon of collecting pictures and why they loved it, and that when you're a human being, you die 3 times. You die when your body stops, breathing, and you die the last time someone ever says your name, and the 3rd time you die is the last time someone ever sees an image of you. So in a creepy sort of way, I feel like these people haven't quite died yet, even though their bodies stopped functioning a long, long time ago.
There's such an interesting wonder in giving life to those people. Like, as you say, they are orphaned and in your care, which of course has direct parallels to the novels. And you feel a strange sense of responsibility to them, which also has a parallel to the novels. And I wonder if that's something that you like discovered later as you were writing other books, or something that you knew going into writing the first book.
This feeling of responsibility toward the people.
Yeah, that like you were essentially like taking you were taking care of a bunch of orphans.
That literally only occurred to me now. That's very insightful.
Well, you said it. I just restated it. That's actually what we've been doing for 25 years. Is you say something, I restate it, and then you say that it's funnier. That's funny. But while we are talking about those pictures, and I know that we're here to talk about Miss Peregrine, but I do want to say, if you don't know, Ransom has a book called Talking Pictures that explores some of these photographs that change dramatically when you see the back of them, and it's a wonderful book. So just you can order that at bn.com.
That book never gets any love.
Just like you can order the new Miss Peregrine book. So I want to ask you about that because
I've got one right here. This one is this dude, and on the back it says, "This is in that book. This is the bum Gloria is in love with." Stuff like that.
oh man, somewhere there's a picture of me at the age of 25, and on the back of it is "This is the bum Sarah's in love with."
That whole thing about like how the pictures became a book, it's a really long story. It could probably fill the whole hour, and I won't do that. But I did briefly think that it was going to be a book of poetry, and I made a bunch of poems to accompany the books. It was going to be like an Edward Gorey, but with photographs instead of drawings. This one is Margaret Bede. Somehow she'd gotten it into her head that she could communicate with the dead, and so on. All of these had that, and my editor at the time was like, "That's not a good idea for a book. You should make a fiction book with stories." And I was like, "Yes!" And it unlocked this sort of, the thing I'd wanted to do for years. I shouldn't have had to ask permission to do it, but when he gave it to me, I was like thrilled, and I ran toward it.
And now it's been 10 years and 6 books, plus a couple of extra books. And
Mhm.
and I mean, I think I can say this without spoilers, that this is a moment of farewell to the story. I mean, for you, maybe not permanently. Like I think there's endlessness in this world, but it is the end of this series, and that's 10 years of your life, but it's also this epic journey. And I wonder, I mean, when you started, I don't know if you had 6 books in mind, but it certainly feels like you did. Like and I wonder, like, to what extent you knew everything that was coming, and how it feels, being now 10 years in, and with this sixth book that is the last for now.
I had no idea. I had no idea. I had a plan to write one book and then go back to writing screenplays that no one wanted to buy, and pursue a career as a filmmaker. Um, but I had a hope that I had nurtured, which was that I would be asked to or allowed to write more one day, and so I left that world purposely very open, to give myself lots to explore, and I just kept doing that. The second book I thought would be the last book,
Hmm.
but then when I got about halfway through it, I was like, "Oh, the story is not finished at all. I need to write a third book." And then after I finished Library of Souls, I thought, okay, that's it. They're okay. I've answered the big questions. The tension is, but then they were in America, and I really wanted to know what they were doing in America. So every time I tried to go do something else, I felt like I had more questions to answer and more story to tell, and I kept coming back to it.
Yeah. Well, I have to say I'm glad that you have. I also wanted to ask you about setting. Both, I mean, your settings are double in a way, because there's the locational setting of the book, and then there's like the time setting of the book. Like, why did we, and maybe there's no answer for this, but it's just something I've always wondered, like, why, I know why we started in Florida. It's the same reason you and I both started in Florida. It's the same reason Paper Town starts in Florida. But why did we go to Wales? Like, and can you talk about some of how you develop ideas around both like spatial setting and temporal setting?
Well, I had um, far I had a privileged upbringing in southern Florida in the 1980s and 90s for sure, but I still felt like it was a fairly mundane place that was a bit stifling and designed mainly for retirees over the age of 70 and not for me. And it was not, I just wanted, I wanted to find the rest of the world. And I dreamed of portals to elsewhere and read books about them, and So in some ways, Jacob going to somewhere that is the complete opposite of sunny suburban, very modern Florida was a wish fulfillment for my 12-year-old self or 15-year-old self who would love to have found a secret portal to some other world where anything was possible. And building that environment was very important for me. The setting is really like a character
Mm.
in my mind, and it affects the characters in the story so profoundly that I need it to be really completely imagined, so that when I'm writing the book, I can imagine every corner they go around, every step they're taking, what they're feeling when they're there. It's just where I start for some reason. Um, I was driving around with Tahara earlier today, and we were going to a particular place, and I knew the way without any kind of maps or anything. And she was really amazed. And I was like, I just have maps in my brain. I don't know why. I forget really basic things, but when it comes to locations and the spatial world, it's just like locked in. It's part of how my brain works. I don't know why.
Yeah, and you can also see these, you can see vast visuals that are not of this world, and you always have been able to. Like, this is something that I would be in awe of when we were in college and you would write like stupid sketch comedy. You would write it with this like rich visual imagination of what this like hypothetical village in Bethlehem looked like 2,500 years ago or whatever. And I close my eyes and I like see the world of my novels and I see like two heads talking to each other. That's all I've ever seen. um but I love, that's one of the things I love about these books is the way that you like, I mean, storms of bones, and I just, it's so all that stuff is just astonishing to me. And I have to think that some of it too comes from your interest in exploring both like uh traveling, seeing different parts of the world, meeting lots of different people, but also urban exploring, from uh getting to know spaces that are also orphaned in a way, that have also been left for a kind of dead. And have often, I know you've taken me on some pretty intense urban exploring experiences. Some of the most stressful moments of my life have been spent with you. Um, and I wonder what the role of that is. I see this again as a way that you have of going to places that are not loved, or maybe ignored, or maybe looked past or looked over, and you give them a kind of like loving and careful attention, which is something I find really beautiful about your work.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed all those stressful experiences, and
Me too.
I was
It was
just looking
great.
through some photos today. I found a picture of us in that old abandoned hospital basement today. I wasn't looking for it. It just happened across.
Oh,
It's
wow.
very strange that you should mention that right now. I think we almost got asbestos poisoning. I lost my light. That's all right. The
So
artifice is exposed. Um, uh, I feel like I've always been obsessed with the blank spots on the map, and something in me feels compelled to fill them in as much as I can. Um, in terms of the real world that you can see and explore, and the left behind parts, and um, the parts that are completely hypothetical. Uh, I think it extends to that too. If there's a secret portal out there, I'd love to find that and see what's inside that too. I would love to be just like a fly who could go anywhere, and not just not all the time. Just sometimes I'd like to be a fly who could go anywhere and not bother anyone, and just see like, well, what's in there? I guess it sounds very nosy, but I want to complete my picture of the world.
yeah, I don't think it sounds nosy so much as it sounds like this, like intense curiosity, desire to like. There's actually a great young adult novel called Fly on the Wall, That's sort of a reworking of The Metamorphosis by E. Lockhart that
Mm.
explores that exact idea in which like the main character turns into a fly on the wall. Um, but so here we are, 10 years on. And before I turn to the audience questions, of which there are a lot, Ransom. So we may have to do like a
Well,
lightning round. We may have to answer with one word answers. Um,
I can do that.
I want to end my portion by just asking you, like how it feels today, because this is a huge day. Like this is, you know, this is a kind of goodbye to a world that's been a huge part of your life for so long.
It's bittersweet. It's definitely great. It feels like a victory. For a long time, I was anxious about this moment because I didn't know how the story was going to end. I had ideas, but
Mm.
I had not figured it out. And I think that's part of my trick is that I don't know where I'm going half the time, and so my books cannot be predictable.
Right.
So I surprise myself when I get there, and the reader is surprised too. But
Is that true?
I have just been.
You don't plan out the twists and turns?
I try to, but I always come up with ideas I like more as I'm writing, and so that never ends up being what happens.
Yeah,
It's
I
I
mean,
need to have a plan to start, but then the plan evaporates.
do you treat first drafts kind of as a blueprint, almost like as a way of trying to find the skeleton, or do you treat first drafts as a way of like trying to build the body, if that distinction makes sense?
I try to treat first drafts as if they're final drafts because I had a few books that I had to rewrite completely from the ground up, and it was traumatizing, and I don't like doing it that way. Uh, so yeah, I think my writing process has evolved over the years and changed a little bit with every book. And the last two um, have the first from the first draft to the last have not changed super much. Um, so I think I'm getting better at that. But
Yeah.
it also might be that I'm on like book 5 and 6 of a long established series. You know, when I write something completely new, there's going to be a lot more finding involved. I know who these characters are, you know, like the
Hmm.
back of my hand. I start a scene and they start talking, you know.
Right. Yeah, I would think that would be the fun part of writing a series. Like the hard part, of course, is having to like tie up loose ends and solve problems that like past you created 2 books ago or whatever. But when I imagine it, and I can only imagine it because I can't, I could never write a series. But like when I imagine it, I always think like that would be the fun part is like going back and like, oh, I already know how this person talks. Like I know this person really well. This is actually one of like, it's almost like hanging out with old friends.
Yeah, in fact, it's always tempting to just have the characters hang out with each other and talk and mess around, but that's not very dramatic. So I always, you know, have to disappoint myself and set the room on fire or introduce some peril.
I've made a career out of having people just sit in a room and talk. You can do it.
Your
Um,
books are much more than two characters talking to each other, by the way. They're richly
thanks.
imagined.
I appreciate that. So I want to ask some questions. I like this question from Gabby because it puts you on the spot and asks you to answer an uncomfortable question, which is my favorite kind of question to ask you. But I'm not asking it. It's Gabby's fault, not mine. Gabby writes, when did you know that this series was going to be big? Like, was there a moment when you thought this is going to be a best-selling series? What, because so a little bit of background on this. Like Ransom and I would talk when he was writing Miss Peregrine, and I always felt like I was trying to like temper expectations, you know, like publishing's a tough business, takes a long time to build an audience and everything. Um, but it happened pretty fast, didn't it?
I think it debuted on the bestseller list,
Yeah. So
and I
like,
was like, that's good, right? That's isn't that really good?" Uh, I was such a newbie, and I didn't expect it at all. But I didn't. I mean, I had no idea that it would keep going, and hang on and hang on and hang on. With very, I don't know, there was not like a giant marketing campaign or anything, and I was so green, I didn't know what to expect. And I figured that, eventually people will stop reading this book and stop talking about it and, move on. And I don't know, it just hung on and hung on. And I was able to write a second one and keep expanding the world, and people read those books too. And so I don't know, it kind of snuck up on me. There wasn't like an oh my god moment. We may have had a couple of conversations between the two of us where you were like, hey, this is a big deal, and I was like, yeah, I guess it was, or I guess it is, this is amazing.
Yeah, I mean,
but I didn't go on any big tours.
right.
I didn't, there wasn't any like big external thing. It was just stuff on the internet, and a little, like a line item in the newspaper saying, oh, it's number 8 this week, and then be like, what does that mean? It took me years to figure out what it means.
Well, it really is. I mean, I think from the very beginning, it felt very different from anything anyone else had ever read. Certainly for me, it felt very different from anything I'd ever read. And like, I felt that way reading each of the books. Like I've just started the last one today, but I felt that way each time, that like nobody else does this. And so I think that's part of it. But yeah, it's, on the subject, as we were talking about earlier, of you feeling some kind of obligation to try to breathe life into these people, whose images have ended up in in flea markets or in abandoned shoeboxes or whatever. Like a book lives through its readers, and it survives as long as it's read, and you never know how long that's going to be. It's not going to be forever, but you never know how long it's going to be. And like, it is so lovely that they're, just that they're all still in print, that like people are all still finding all of your books, is just a, like, that in and of itself is an astonishment. I think, like, doesn't always happen that way.
It continues to amaze me when I go to a bookstore and I'll see the first book. I wrote that a long time ago, and here it still is, and it's sort of amazing to me. I think you and I were talking the other day, and you talked about how when you write the first novel, you do it with this sort of like innocence of just total enthusiasm, and you're not bounded by anything. And I had no expectations that the book would go anywhere or be read by more than 2 people. So I felt and I didn't, I had no ambitions to be a novelist. Really, I wanted, I wanted to write this book. It was very exciting, but I thought I was going to go do something else. And so I was like, I'm just going to have fun with it, and I'm going to, put all of my ideas in here. And I don't, I'm not looking at other books as a guidepost to how a book is supposed to be or supposed to look. And if it fails, that's fine. And that, like, if it fails, that's fine, gave me the freedom to make something that I'm still proud of, which is kind of amazing.
But I also think it's that there's a certain amount of freedom that comes from, like, this isn't even my world. Like like I'm not deeply enmeshed in the world of telling, of like publishing stories this way. But you were like a deep reader. And that's a question we have from Caitlin, who says, do you spend a lot of time reading, and what type of books do you enjoy?
I do spend a lot of time reading, but I find that I don't read much fiction when I'm writing fiction, because it sort of messes with my head, and it makes me, everything I read, I'm like, oh, that's great, I want to do that, and then it knocks me off course in my own writing. And I've been doing a lot of writing the last few years, so I've been reading a lot of like nonfiction and very old strange books. Yeah, so really all over the map.
Yeah. This is this question from an anonymous attendee, I think, is interesting, because I'm curious if your answer is the same as my answer. The question is, what is your favorite fictional trope? My answer, before you answer, is that I don't know what any of them
Think about
are.
that.
And like whenever people are like, this is that trope, I've never heard of it. Like I may have read it 55,000 times, but I don't know what it is. Like I don't know any of the tropes. Um, and when I use them, I use them with a lack of self-awareness a lot of times. Now, like sometimes like you're working inside of a genre, you know what you're doing, you're
Yeah,
trying to make
yeah.
fun of the genre. But like a lot of times, like I find that like having a very strong sense of like this was done by person X in year Y is not helpful to me as a storyteller. But I don't know. I don't know if you would feel differently.
No, I agree. I feel like if it's kind of like how I know English, I know it innately because I grew up speaking it. But if you ask me about the arcane rules of grammar, I'll be like, I don't know. And
Yeah.
reading, the way stories are put together feels the same. I've been devouring them since I was very young, and
Right.
so sometimes people will say things to me like, "Well, what are the themes of your book?" And I'll be like, "I don't know. I think it's your job to tell me."
That reminds me of a
But
great.
and that sounds very dismissive, but it's true. Like if I think about that while I'm writing, I start prioritizing the wrong things. If I'm thinking about the theme of my book as I'm drafting a scene, then the scene becomes preachy and
Mhm.
overbearing.
Yeah, I
So
completely
I'm not
agree.
sure. I will think about what is my favorite trope. I'm sure I've read it 100 times.
Yeah, I like the one where, despite having read a million detective novels, every time I read a detective novel, I'm always shocked by who did it. That's my that's my favorite trope. When you like when the author tricks me over, when Agatha Christie tricks me every single time.
That's the
Um,
magic. Yeah.
uh, there's a lot of questions about will there be more books? Will there be more peculiars? Where else will they go? And I think the answer to that is just that we don't know yet.
I read there's a quote from somebody, I think it was Rudyard Kipling or something, who said, uh, "Just because I stopped writing the story doesn't mean it's over. That's just where I stopped."
Yeah.
Um, which is not necessarily a dodge of that question. I'm just not sure yet. There will be a little surprise coming up for fans at some point that hopefully I can talk about fairly soon. But in terms of more novels set in the world, maybe one day. I deliberately designed it so that the door has not been slammed shut.
You didn't write an epilogue that takes place like 30 years later.
That would be slamming the door for sure.
Catherine asks, what was the first peculiar child besides Jacob that you were able to fully develop in your mind? Like, was there a photograph that you felt like you were able to fully develop who that person was from that picture?
I'm sure I have it here. Hang on. I have a bunch of them. They're very small though, and they get lost. Ah, you guys see this?
Yeah.
I've been wondering about the provenance of this photo for years, and I still don't know. It's just a snapshot. It's not a Photoshop. It's from the 30s. Um, he's got no head. What the hell's going on here? I don't know. So this became Millard very, very soon. I decided there needed to be an invisible boy. That seemed like an obvious uh, choice. So that became Millard. And this one I found very early on, of course.
Such a great.
And I really wish there was something. There's nothing on here. She's not actually floating. That was a tiny bit of Photoshop to enhance it a little bit. But I think even without that, it's pretty creepy. And
Oh
she's
yeah.
in front of this appears to be a backdrop, these trees, with the
Uh-huh.
skeletal branches and things. But why would someone create a backdrop that's so horrible? This was the 1930s. They weren't making creepy pictures on purpose. So I had to figure out who that was. And so that's how these came about. I just found photos that I found that felt evocative to me. And here, this one was pretty obvious. This is Bronwyn's brother Victor, and he's very strong.
Yeah.
So some of them seemed obvious, and some of them needed a little elaboration. But they all came to me very quickly. But I think Millard was the first one.
One of the interesting things about a picture, right, is that it's just it's a little bit of light and a little bit of time. Like that's what a picture is. This like tiny amount of light and this tiny amount of time, and
Yeah.
and but you can't help, like, one of the like you can't help but imagine the moments before and the moments after, and then you can't help but like extrapolate out from that. And we do that every time we look at a picture. Like we do that every time we're scrolling through Instagram. We're extrapolating out, the moments before and the moments after. And but you take it like these pictures that are 90 years old and very weird and extrapolate, like, just, extrapolate out in a direction that like we don't do most of the time on Instagram.
Would that I could, push on this picture and get the live view and see the second after it, but it might ruin it a little bit. If I knew more about it,
Yes.
I'd probably be very, very disappointed in whoever this was. It would take away a lot of the magic. So, in as much as I wish I knew a little bit about them, I'm also kind of glad they're anonymous because I can make up stories about them.
Yeah.
Of course, in the beginning stages, in many cases, it was the photo where I was like, oh, I need a character like that. But after the main characters had been established, it was really finding pictures to fit the story rather than any of the other way around. It was just, the story had all of its own momentum, and I had all these characters already. And that became an interesting challenge, actually, because I wanted to have a sort of a similar number of pictures in every book. But the easiest way to include a picture in a book is to introduce a new character. Oh, who's this? Here we meet somebody. Who's that? But I can't have 40 or 50 new characters in a book. It would just become totally weighed down with extraneous people. So I had to start finding, well, I need a picture of that Zeppelin floating over the beach in Wales at dawn or whatever. And that's where the real challenge came in.
Yeah.
And the
So
serendipity,
so
the
you
happy
would write a
accidents.
scene and then you would be like, I got to find a picture that will work for that.
Well, I'd like to find a picture that would work for that. It was more like it. And that often didn't happen. Or later I would find a picture that was sort of like the scene, but a little different. But I found that if I tweak the scene a little bit to fit the picture, suddenly it worked perfectly. So it was kind of an organic thing. It was like, the pictures altered the story a little, and the story altered the pictures I looked for, and they're all inseparable now.
Right. Yeah. Have you ever heard from anybody that was like, that's my aunt?
Once somebody said that's my great grandmother, but they were one of the photo collectors that I get pictures from.
Oh.
So I was really confused and somewhat skeptical. But nobody else has ever reached out. And then no one certainly, no one's ever told me stories about any of the people in this book. I figure if enough people read the books, maybe one day someone will say something or come out with something.
Maybe.
And I'd be fascinated to hear. But I looked it up once. Even in the 1940s, there were like 500 million pictures taken every year and printed or something. So there's just oceans of material, lost stuff out there, and the likelihood that someone's going to find their great grandmother in here is, I think that happened once, and that's probably the lightning strike.
Right. Michelle asks, Ransom, what was your best junior high memory? I teach 8th grade, which I wanted to ask that question because 8th grade teachers are doing the Lord's work, and we are very grateful.
Oh my God, they are. 8th grade was tough. Did you say best or worst? There's so many of the latter category.
I said best, but worst is way easier for me too.
Worst is way easier. Well, I think a lot of my best middle school memories happened during middle school with my friends not at school. We spent a lot of time making movies, like home movies in the backyard. And my friends were all the cast and prop masters, and I would be the director with my little crappy handy cam. And we had no editing software back then, so I would have to be like, okay, start, stop, and then you go over here, and then I cut in the camera, and they were all, we had so much fun doing that. But the first day of sixth grade, I had to change schools and go to a new campus, and it was very intimidating. And as I was walking to my first class, a bird took a giant crap on my head, and that set the tone for all of sixth grade, really.
Adrian asks, why did you choose the name Alma for Miss Peregrine? I love the names in this book, but I also love the backstories of names. But when I asked my brother this question on the stage about his book, An Absolutely Remarkable Thing, he said, because I was like writing it, and that's just the word that came into my mind. So if that's the answer, I'm going to be bummed out.
Alma, I don't know. I don't remember where that came from. I'm sorry. That's
Are there any
disappointing.
names? Are there
But
any
Miss
names?
Peregrine came very early.
Did Miss Peregrine come from? Where did it come from?
It just popped into my head as I was walking down the street trying to name the book. So I sort of, I was like, that's a cool title for a book. I have to make that a character.
It is. I mean,
but some of the other characters, Enoch. I remembered that name from Flannery O'Connor's Wise Blood. I knew a guy who called himself Millard. His stage name for his weird like rock band was Sir Millard Mulch, so I grabbed that. My friend Chris Logan's last name became Golan instead of Logan.
Right.
And Jake lives in his house. Jacob lives in his house in Florida. I have these very specific, architectures in my head when I'm plotting out scenes, and I had to know where Jacob lived. So I don't think I ever describe his house in great detail, but in my head I know exactly what's upstairs and downstairs and out the window. I knew a Pickering. His name wasn't Ricky. The kid who was Ricky Pickering, I actually knew, but his name was something else, and he really did drive a very old Crown Victoria and would earn $1 every time someone would hit it with a baseball bat. That was a real thing. That was and he was a wonderful, funny, devout person with a huge green mohawk and foul mouth and redneck accent. And there was just a lot of interesting characters like that in Florida, and I wanted to put at least one of them in this book.
It is a blessing to know those people. My friend, the writer Daniel Alarcon, told me once that the fact that something happened is not a reason to put it in a book, but it's also not a reason to not put it in a book. Like if somebody gives you good material and it's not going to hurt them to use it, use it.
Yeah, I feel like my writing is all just grabbing things from here and grabbing things from there, from real life and other books and photos and my memories. And, it comes out as extremely fantastical and fake and fictional, but it's, I think all of our books are made of the atoms and bits of our lives.
Yeah, it's as much like stitching or knitting as it is like an act of creation, right? Like you have to be working from some kind of raw materials. Juliana Juliana asks, what did it feel like to write the final lines of Devil's Acre? Do you remember that moment, like where you were and how it felt?
Yeah. I was in my writing office, and it was really emotional. I teared up, and that never happens. I think it happened at the end of Library of Souls, but it really felt like I cannot say much without giving away a lot and spoiling the book, but I really wanted to leave the characters in a place that felt that honored them in some way after having spent so much time with them. Didn't want to treat them poorly or cast them aside. And I wanted, after the series was over and the book was over, I wanted the reader to be able to imagine the characters in the place where I leave them and not feel bad or
Mm,
nervous about them, or you know what I mean?
right.
Because it might be the last book for a long time or maybe forever. And I wanted them, to look back on them and be like, well, if they'd all been like hit by a car, uh, that it would have felt bad. It would taint the whole series, I think. So anyway, it was very emotional, and I cried a little bit.
It is a magical, it's a magical moment, like when you say goodbye to something that you've loved so dearly. And I think that's exactly the right impulse to, I mean, Laurie Halse Anderson said something along those lines once a long time ago that really stuck with me, that when she was writing Speak, she wanted to make sure that she left the book and the story and the character, the central character, in a place where the reader and the author were okay, like where the reader and the author could feel okay, saying goodbye. Because it is like when we read fiction, we have that, like, there's that like amazing feeling you get at the end of a book you love, that like the feeling, like there's no other way to get it. I'm sure there's a word for the feeling and I just don't know what it is, but that feeling that you get. And like when you read a series that you love and you reach the end of it, it's that feeling. If the ending is satisfying, it's like that feeling times 1,000. And that for me is that feeling. It's this feeling of wistfulness, but also this feeling of like, it's okay to say goodbye for now.
I could answer and say more things, but there's so many questions, and I want to get to them.
Yeah,
You and I could
why is
talk forever,
peculiar
but I
America
totally
so
agree.
different than the rest of the peculiar world, and why so cut off from Cali?
Well, it's in a map of days. If you want to refresh, but why I made it that way was I just didn't want to do the same thing over again. I mean, it was just selfishly, I was bored, and I wanted to make this part of the world different. And we're also like a very divided country. There's a lot of conflict here. It's complex, politically and emotionally, and felt like maybe the world should reflect that a little bit. The complexities of American political life are reflected a little bit. I don't get too political in the warring clans of American peculiardom.
Megan asks, oh, I just lost your question, Megan. Do you see yourself as Jacob when you're writing? Like, do you put yourself mostly in his mind?
I mean, I kind of have to because it's first
Right.
person, and you're just going, I did this, me, the whole time. And if I feel like if I don't do that, it's not going to feel immersive and engaging and realistic.
Megan, different Megan, asks, where did the inspiration for Noor come?
Um, no, I mean, it would no place in particular. I just really wanted to. See, I really wanted a character who was of Jacob's world and who
Mm,
was Jacob's age, um, and I felt like his relationship with Emma had run its course and needed to change. It was getting weird, and she was not completely on board and did not love him, in a completely like not related to his grandfather way. And I wanted to introduce someone else who he could, be 16 and a half with, and
mm.
talk about TV shows or whatever. Their shared experience would be more similar, and I thought that would inject a really interesting new dynamic into the series when it really needed it.
And in terms of the peculiar, this is a word I have never been able to say, peculiarities, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, it
What,
messes me up too.
Flory asks, how do you come up with them? And it seems like sometimes it was a photo that led to a peculiarity, and other times it was out of the ether.
Uh, Sometimes it's just really convenient to, I'm in a scene and they're in trouble, and it would be great if someone could just come along and like make an earthquake right now and save everyone's lives. Uh, Sometimes I will dip into a story Bible I started making many years ago that has long lists of peculiarities that I would like to use one day and just never got around to. So I'll go in there. Sometimes it's a photo, but less often these days.
I'm sure you get this question a lot, but we've gotten it several times in comments. What peculiarity would you want?
So I am sort of an obsessive photographer, and I am always irritated by the fact that I see things happening that I would like to take a picture of, and the light is perfect and your expression is perfect. But then once I get out my camera and I'm ready to take it, it has changed and it's not the same picture anymore. So I'd love to be able to have some sort of like Imbrin-esque ability to freeze time just long enough for me to get in the right place and aim the camera and take the picture.
Just like
And then time can go back.
you just need to be able to stop time for like 12 seconds. Like you don't need like I don't need to be a time stopper. I just need
Well,
like a very brief.
it depends on if I need to change my lens or whatever, but like, give me a chance. I see it with my eyes. I just want to be able to put it on film.
Olivia asks, what inspired you to create Enoch? He's such a unique character, and I'm so curious.
The genesis of characters is funny. It's not always a straight line, or an easily tellable, interesting story. I had a photo of a little boy. I feel like the Enoch who developed over the years does not really fit that photo. I wish I could go back and change it because he looks too young and not right to me. So I look at that photo and I'm like, that's not really Enoch. I hope you guys ignore that. I actually really like Finley in the film, who portrays Enoch. I think he looks great. I wish I could have had the picture of him. I would have put that in there. But I just wanted someone grumpy and funny and who's kind of a crap talker. Someone who would challenge Jacob. The kids are really nice to Jacob, and it was getting not interesting. And he sort of had a crush on Emma, and so he feels a little bit jealous of Jacob. And like, who are you coming into? I didn't really like your grandfather either, and you're just barging in here and being important, and you can go home now. Thank you very much. And I just have always enjoyed jumping into his character and complaining. He does that very well.
And the last question, which several people have asked in various different ways, there have been lots of questions. Will you write more books in this world? Which we're not going to get an answer to tonight, I don't think. I don't think we're going to break any news this evening, but maybe I'm wrong. But also, what would you like to do next, or do you know what you'd like to do next, or is right now kind of a moment of reflection before you figure that out?
No, I'm done reflecting. I'm ready to write something new. I have a lot of ideas. I'm not sure exactly what direction I'm going in yet. But I'm excited. Like, once this book week is over, I can really dive into it. But for years, between every book, I have tried to write something else. And I have come up with elaborate ideas and developed, treatments and outlines, and sent them to my agent and editors, and been like, here's what I'm doing next. It's not Miss Peregrine. And then I start thinking about Miss Peregrine again, and I can't get it out of my head. And I'm like, but this story, I'd like to take it in this direction, and it could be so cool. And I spent all this time making the world. No one's going to care if I wait another couple of years to write it. I should just write it now. So that went on for 10 years. But now I'm finally ready to write something different. I'm just not sure what it is yet.
So,
but it won't feel radically different from Miss Peregrine. I'm pretty sure it's not going to be like just a straight romance novel, for instance. It's going to be in the same wheelhouse.
And fiction. You're not going to start writing the kind of weird nonfiction from the 18th century that you've been reading.
Well, on Amazon, The Desolations of Devil's Acre is currently #1 in England travel guides. So I think I already have a leg into that pool. Maybe I'll just keep going with travel guides.
I saw that, which is just yet one more reason to buy your books at bn.com or at your local Barnes and Noble.
Yes.
So I had to get that in there. So The Desolations of Devil's Acre is available now.
That was a perfect segue.
At bn.com 24 hours.
I have to hold it up at some point.
Oh, there we go. Or you can get it from your local Barnes & Noble. And we really, really appreciate Barnes & Noble hosting us this evening and making all of this possible. Yeah, it's just been really lovely to be able to talk with you, Ransom, on this this momentous day. And I'm so thrilled for you. And I'm honestly excited that this, I'm excited to go back and finish reading the book. I don't know if I'm going to finish it tonight, but I might. So I'm really excited to go back to reading it. But yeah, in the meantime, there are links. Look at that. If you go to the chat, there are lots of links to Ransom's Instagram, to my Instagram, which hasn't been updated in 3 years, to all of Ransom's books, and also to Fly on the Wall, which has a blurb from me, apparently. I do really like the book, and to my forthcoming book of essays, The Anthropocene Reviewed, all of which is available at bn.com or at your local Barnes & Noble. So thank you again, Ransom. Thank you to everyone in chat. I'm sorry that we didn't answer all of the questions, but just really, really grateful for this opportunity.
Thank you, John. This was great. I really, I feel like I started this journey like talking to you, and now I'm kind of ending it talking to you. It feels like a nice, like a circle. And I really appreciate your coming out to your computer tonight and spending this hour and reading my book, and just thank you for your insightful questions.
Well,
this was
congratulations
great.
again.
And by the way, before I just want to get this in, I don't know if they're going to cut us off at some point, but to everybody who's signed up for the VIP package, go to your Looped Live app, and I'll see you on there.
Yes. So
and thank you guys, by the way, for just being here for like 10 years, some of you, and still being here and coming out and supporting these books for all this time. I'm immensely grateful, and I'm still amazed that anyone liked it at all. Frankly, I'm really not being humble. I thought that it would disappear and just sit on my bookshelf, and I'm just very grateful to be an author these days and to be able to do this for a living. So thanks for making that possible.
Yeah, well, thank you again, Ransom, and thanks to everybody at BNN as well. And have a wonderful evening on Looped if you have the package, and otherwise an evening reading The Desolations of Devil's Acre.